Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes, sir. Then again I'm falling. Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes, sir. Then again I'm falling. Let Jesus work it out. Please, your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please, your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please, your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Oh, work it out. You work it out for Mother Lisa. Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes, sir. Then again I'm falling. Sometimes I'm gaining, then again I'm losing. Sometimes I'm rising, yes, sir. Then again I'm falling. Let Jesus work it out. Please, your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please, your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Please, your Father would work it out. Oh, let God work it out. Oh, work it out. You work it out for Mother.
All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Carey with Church of the Eternal Logos, and I am joined by the returning guest, Bazed Lit Analyzer. How you doing today, brother?
What's up? What's going on, y'all? Let's go. This is going to be a good one.
I'm excited, man.
Yeah.
You know, we had a really good stream last time talking about The Great Gatsby and Moby Dick, and on my way to California 2 weeks ago, one of the entertainment options on the ride was the movie Beetlejuice, and I hadn't seen that since I was a kid. And I remember as a kid, it was a very entertaining and interesting movie that I had watched multiple times. First time I watched it as an adult, and especially later in my life, And I was dumbfounded by the occult symbolism in the whole thing. And I reached out to you. We were going back and forth when I got back from California. I was like, hey, you want to do a stream on deconstructing the movie Beetlejuice? It was way darker than I ever remembered as a kid.
Yeah. It is. It's amazing because, we were just saying that you guys out there, I'm sure probably everybody's seen this movie. It's one of those movies, in the popular consciousness, and I saw this movie, on VHS when it came out at a friend's house in like 1988. And the movie is like it's really funny for an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
It's like so hilarious when you're 8 years old or when you're a kid. And then I've seen it dozens of times, but then rewatching it as an adult, you watch it and you go, what is this? And why is this funny?
Yeah.
And I think that it's not only dark, it's the movie is supposed to be like a send up of a dark movie, but it actually is a dark movie.
Right.
And I think that there's going to be, I think this is going to be a good discussion because there's a lot to be gleaned from this movie, especially in terms of, occult symbolism, the production of the movie, some of the actors involved with the movie, the writers, the producers, what it was a product of, what it's like, its own legacy. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. I mean, that was the thing that struck me when I first watched it. We can kind of open up, guys, smash that like if you are going to enjoy, or if you do enjoy this stream, and also if you'd be interested, send in super chats using the Streamlabs link. But one of the first things that I noticed was the absence of the word God. So the whole premise of this movie is that a couple moves to a sort of idealistic small town in northeastern United States, I believe Connecticut.
Yeah, Connecticut.
And they die, and they haunt the house that they just purchased to live in this town in. And so certainly a morbid theme throughout the movie, but the whole thing is about trying to scare life out. Again, the bioexorcism, we're going to get into all this stuff, but it was so interesting that they talked about demons, they talked about the devil, they talked about spirits, they talked about possession. Not once did they ever talk about God. I don't think the word God, was ever mentioned in the entire movie.
Yeah, definitely. And in fact, there's one scene where right after they've died, the Maitlands, the character, they're called the Maitlands, Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin, and they find there's a literary element to this movie besides the screenplay and all that. There's a literary element because there's a book that sort of guides their afterlife existence. Yep. It's not a Bible. It's a, book for the undead or for the dead. And one of the things is that like right after they realize that they're dead, that they're ghosts, they say, they question, are we in heaven or are we in hell? And they say, I don't think we're in either. And then Alec Baldwin says, maybe this is our heaven, and kind of smiles because he's with his wife, but that's it. That's
about the closest reference. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, it's strange because it's strange, but it's also not strange in the sense that I wouldn't expect anything else from Hollywood. Right. This is what they do,
right.
But at the same time, it's like, oh, you've got this movie that's about ghosts and it's about the afterlife, but it's like, they sort of assume that the audience does not believe in an afterlife and that this is all a sort of a joke, and that the movie is, the movie is explicitly occult.
Yes.
In its entirety.
And that's what I was stunned by, because as a kid, again, I wasn't privy to all the stuff from the books and the archetypes and everything that I've read now. And so I just remembered it being funny. I remembered the sort of the samba type style music, that prominent song that they play. And then Beetlejuice, and how I thought Beetlejuice, remember as a kid, I thought he was so funny. Oh my gosh, what a funny character. And then rewatching it, it wasn't that funny of a movie. I did think that Michael Keaton played Beetlejuice pretty well. I'll give him that. But it was intensely occultic. and so we can start then moving wherever you want to open up the conversation. We can start moving right now. We're just kind of giving a general framework from the beginning of the movie on through, but even the family, he's a bioexorcist is how Beetlejuice is portrayed. And so from a Christian standpoint, exorcism is the exorcism of demons, which then is darkness, which then is death. So in a way, an exorcism is the exorcising of death out of a person. And at the same time, he's the bioexorcist. So his whole thing is about the exorcism of life.
It's a reversal.
Yeah, the exact opposite.
Yeah. And he explicitly, at one part, he talks about when you first meet him, and he says, he kind of gives his history. He says, I've been alive, I was in the plague. I was in all these places, and I've got he says, like, I've got rats, I've got whatever you want. I've got demons.
Yeah.
But he is a demon. Right. So like you said, like his whole job is to execute the living. So it's a sort of it's weird because it's a reversal of like an inverse. And with the Michael Keaton character, like you said, like with the archetypes, I mean, he's also like an entertainment archetype. He's a vaudeville character, he's like a carny, but like a music hall showman. He's also like a trickster. He's a Beelzebub character.
Yep.
But he's also a creeper, which of course I never got when I was young. But at the climax of the movie, we'll get to that. But at the climax of the movie, there's something you watch as an adult, and it's pretty disturbing. So I guess we'll get into that.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll move through that. To open up again, one of the things I thought was interesting is just looking at what is the symbolism of Beetles, right? His name is Beetlejuice, and sure, the spelling, I saw that the script wrote his name in a certain way, and then the title of the movie's not exactly, that's how you pronounce his name, that's not actually how they spelt it.
Right.
But still, magic is based on the way words sound, not how they're spelt.
Right.
And when you start looking into the meaning of the beetle, it's really interesting because the beetle is a symbol associated with the persistence in times of trouble. It's associated with intelligence. It's associated with strength to carry on through hard times. It's associated with chaos and teamwork. It's associated with the Beatles' meaning shows that you can compromise in a way only to maintain the integrity and beliefs, that it's representative of a particular predicament people may be in. And so that's totally consistent then with the framework of the movie. The movie is this young couple that has no children, in an idyllic situation in town, finds themselves dead. They die again, crossing a bridge, which is already a transitory symbol right there, right? A bridge between one world to another. They die on the bridge. In a way, they never make it to one side or the other, which is then indicative of them being stuck in the house. But they're stuck in, again, this sort of predicament situation, and they have to exercise life. So it's so funny then they call on Beetlejuice, and the beetle symbolism, whether you go back to ancient Egypt or various pagan cultures, is a symbol associated with like perseverance and strength in precarious situations.
Yeah. I was just reading about beetle symbolism because shameless plug here. I just did a part 1 analysis of this Aleister Crowley book, and I'm about to do a part 2 analysis. And the beetle pops up, like you mentioned, Egypt. It pops up when Crowley goes to when he's at the museum in Egypt, and he's directed by his medium wife after he's done this ritual in the desert, and he goes and he finds a slab with a statue of Horus on it, and it's exhibit number 666, and there's a beetle, and so it's like the winged beetle, and the beetle represents this certainly like an occult symbol that deals with possession, that with crossing over to the other side, with crossing an abyss, and aside from the one thing that I think is interesting is that the name of the star, right, was pronounced how Alec Baldwin pronounces it when he first opens the book and sees the name of the star, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then he changes the name, like you said, spelling and sound matters, and then he changes it, and that's what he says it 3 times. The idea of 3 is obviously, with, it sort of represents an inverted trinity. This is like a thing with witchcraft. We saw this in Macbeth.
An inverted trinity where the name is the same person, right? Our trinity is 3 persons, 1 essence.
Right.
It's 1 essence, 1 person, named 3 times.
Yeah, and they call him up from the dead, not only from the dead, but from the dead, because he's buried.
Right, yes.
He's buried like within the
realm of death.
First of all, he's buried within the simulacrum of the town, right? Because he's like a little figurine in the town that they built, because he's like a model maker. And then he rises out of that, and then he rises into the world, right? Because they call him up, they conjure him, like in a Faustus sense. And it's interesting that this movie is responsible. One of the things that this movie has done in terms of like pop culture seeping into our normal everyday speech is like, that's how people pronounce the name of the star now. They pronounce it. I've always done that since I saw the movie. Oh, that's Beetlejuice, in Orion. I don't know if astrology or anything plays an important role in this film, but certainly the star system and Saturn plays a role in the film, because when they go through the door to the other side, to the other world, and at one point Beetlejuice mentions when you die in death, when your soul leaves your body, you're sent. He says, "I'm going to send you to Saturn, where the sandworm lives."
Right.
That was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, what should we do? Should we start from the?
Yeah, let's just start going through chronologically through the movie.
Yeah.
So take it away. We can open up with really how the movie up until they die, or how. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, one thing I noticed right from the beginning. So the movie begins like with these ominous synth notes, and it's very 80s, and then we get into the Danny Elfman score. But the important thing is that the first tone of the synth of the score, combined with what we see when the movie opens, is really reminiscent of The Shining. It's like the same opening as The Shining, because The Shining opens with this bass tone from Wendy Carlos, the composer, and then we see the Torrances. Are they in a yellow Beetle like Ted Bundy? I think they're driving through Colorado, but we see it from the point of view is from above. And so what you get is the sense that like we're watching them from above, and combined with the music, it's almost like a demon is watching them, which will then, possess them or possess Jack. And we get that in this because we get the ominous tones from the beginning. And the first thing we see is an overhead shot looking down onto the town. And we're sort of following this car, following the town. And then it switches it up, because it's like if you guys have seen Hereditary, we think we're looking at a house at a town, but it actually becomes the model.
Right.
Because we're looking at the model. So that's to give the sense that that the characters in this movie are playthings. They're models for something else.
Yeah.
To sort of play them. And go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it also hints at the magical concept of sympathetic connections, correspondential connections, as above, so below. And so when you do, that's what is a voodoo doll? Is you literally create the entity so that then you can torture them and do things to them. And so isn't it ironic then that, again, he up in the attic, he's recreating the town, the model town, and this is going to then be the place where they sort of reside for the rest of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, they're also in the attic, which always occurs in explicitly occult movies where, there's some sort of ritual going on in the house. It's always in the attic. And we see the spider crawling over the house. So we know that, spiders occur throughout the movie.
Yep. But
we know that like the spider crawling in the house is, first of all, there's like an old folk like wives' tale thing about like when you open your door and you see a spider crawling up the inside of your door, it means you're going to have an unexpected visitor. And of course, the unexpected visitor in this is death.
Right.
and Beetlejuice himself, and then the unexpected sale of the house with the visitors coming into the house. Right. And I would say that may seem random. Oh, that's just an incidental symbolism. It's accidental or whatever. But later on, Otho, the character Otho, enters the house through the window. If you notice,
yes,
right, and he is explicitly occult.
Yes.
In the movie.
It's for good, and because you said, well, it's bad luck to enter, through the doorway.
Yes, he does a seance in the house. He does, and he's kind of an empath, or whatever. He's like, he sees the Book of the Dead, and he like immediately takes it and goes.
And he's a sort of half spirit figure, right? So,
yes.
For those of you who don't know what that means, in Native American traditions, they had 3 genders: male, female, and then a half spirit was a man who they believed had a female soul, which we would call a homosexual man. And half spirits in Native American traditions were always associated with funerary rites, burials, because it was believed that because of this sort of intermediate space that they were better at transitioning between the realms of life and death.
Right.
And so
he's kind of I don't know about like a Baphomet figure, but he's certainly sort of androgyne in a way. And Beetlejuice, actually, he's an object of Beetlejuice's mockery and contempt it's very brief, but Beetlejuice insults him. And there's a lot that I can say about that character. But I think that the spider also is like that they are walking in, they're like walking into a web. They're walking into a trap of sorts. They won't be able to leave. They won't be able to leave their house. The spider is on the model of the house.
Right.
And like you said, we meet these like normal, this sort of normal, like cookie cutter couple, except like you said, they don't have children. And they wear the same clothes throughout the film. He's like in khakis and he's got like a black and white checker shirt. So obviously the black and white checkerboard. And then later, when they open the door to the other world, there's a black and white checkerboard floor.
And Beetlejuice wears a black and white striped suit.
Yes.
And then the serpentine figure in that sort of dune desert landscape is also black and white striped. So you see a connection between Beetlejuice and the serpent. You see a connection between Adam wearing the black and white checkered with the red undershirt, and then you can associate that with the black and white checkerboard when they enter into the realm of death,
right?
And meet the.
I forgot his name was Adam, by the way.
Yeah. So he's a sort of different Adam, but it's Barbara, it's not Eve,
right?
But so his name is Adam, which is also very interesting because it's Adam that brought us into death, through the fall.
But it's also Adam and Barbara. It's like alpha and beta, but she at times is the alpha character.
Right.
Even the song, the Deo song that comes up, the Harry Belafonte song, the really famous song from
Banana.
Yeah, the Banana Boat song. They one of the lyrics is it's a Calypso song. That also is their esoteric connections with Calypso. But one of the lyrics is 6 foot, 7 foot, 8 foot punch. And it's the woman. It's something about the woman. The woman is 8 feet tall. It's almost like they're an inverted in terms of their relationship. She's not quite dominant in the relationship.
No.
But there are certainly, there are certainly the women in this movie play certainly a major role. In the relationship amongst the Dietzes, she's the wife that moves into the house is certainly the dominant character. And like you said earlier, then they go into town. One thing that's interesting is they go into town. He owns a hardware store, and there's like an old man sitting outside who's sort of babbling, and he's talking about the past, and he's sort of babbling into nothingness.
Yeah.
And I thought that was almost like it reminded me of like the Odyssey or something, that we're going on this journey, and we have sort of babbling prophet characters who are sort of giving an indication of what's going to happen in the story. He leaves. Like you said, they get on the bridge. They go across a red bridge, and then they they see a dog, and I guess it would have been too much if they'd seen a black dog, right? Because but they see the dog, and then they go, and then they crash through the bridge, and then they fall into the water. So they have this sort of tarot death by water. And one of the weird things about that was that later on, when they, you notice that Adam and Barbara in the movie are not wet, right? They're not dripping wet, even though they died by drowning. But everybody else in the movie, in the afterlife of the movie, is in the garb of like how they died.
Yeah.
Yes. And I thought that was it. And I think the reason for that is simply that the literal reason is simply that like Tim Burton was like, you guys died and you drowned, so you're going to be wet the whole movie. And they were like, no, we're not. We're going to be comfortable because we're actors. And he was like, okay. But I don't know what to make of it in terms of the esoteric symbolism of it. I'm not sure if it was just something to forget or if it was sloppy, but they show up at their house right after that, and then immediately we're thrown into it. One thing that's good about the movie is the pacing. The pacing of the movie, it's like there's not much exposition, and we as an audience, I find that often is the case, like with older movies, especially, or like movies that are geared towards a sort of a child audience, is that when they're clever, they leave the exposition out because the audience can figure it out. Mm-hmm. And that's not something that's common anymore. But the only thing that they say is essentially like, do you remember coming back home? And she's like, no, I don't remember how we got here. And then they're like, oh, we're dead. And that's it. So we're thrown right into the story.
Right.
And then the next part is he tries to leave the house. He opens the door.
Yes.
And then he falls into the like other world. He goes through essentially a portal.
Right.
And it's a desert landscape with, an arid desert landscape, but we see like, moons in the sky. It's sort of vaporwave almost. And then there's this like dune sandworm that is cruising through the desert. And then she has to pull him back into this like door in the dark or whatever, back into the house. And we later learn from Beetlejuice that was Saturn. Yeah. So, and of course, Saturn is, I'm sure people watching this will know that like Saturn is, Temple of Set. It's the
god
Saturn
of time,
has the
Chronos,
right?
God of Death,
Saturn
the
has
Grim Reaper.
Saturn has the hexagonal storms at the poles.
Yeah, strange how that works. Yeah.
That's crazy.
I've never seen storm clouds move in such a pattern, but
right. That's crazy. Yeah, you tell people that in your life. I said it to somebody recently, and they were like, I don't know why we were talking about planets, but I was like, it was like a conversation with the fellas, it was like, what's your favorite planet, man? And I was like, I don't know. And they were like, mine's Saturn. And I was like, did you know Saturn has infinite hexagonal storms and that, Saturn is the planet of Satan? And they were like, what? And I was like, I don't know. You can look it up, but
it's the Lord of the Rings.
Right. Yeah. So what happens next?
Well, the family moves in that takes over their house, and this house is sort of like their Horcrux, right? Like their existence, is somehow tied to this home, because when they step out of the home again, they're like in the infinite realms of death or whatnot.
Yeah.
The family that moves in, one of the things that I immediately thought was so interesting, again, is we see with Adam and Barbara a fairly traditional. She's feminine. She wears long dresses. She's, I'm not going to say like trad, but I mean, there was a normative male-female relationship with Adam and Barbara. Then what comes in is a very wealthy man who's been divorced, who has a daughter, who's been remarried to this new woman, who sees herself as a sort of socialite, an artist, somebody famous trying to make it into the art magazines. And she does all this very morbid modern art. And at the same time, the daughter, who's then not with it. And does it say what happened to her biological mother? No. So you don't know exactly. It was a divorce. Did she die? What happened? But the little girl is very morbid. She wears all black. Her skin's very, very white. She's fascinated. She's not scared by the ghost. She's fascinated with death. She finds it very interesting. And so we see then a dominant female role with a submissive male role. I mean, the beginning of the, they go through the house and she's changing with, again, who's the other guy that came through the window?
Otho.
Otho. So
Yeah.
she's moving through the house, changing. Oh, we're going to do this to this room, this to this, and the husband who's purchased this whole thing, who actually is the source of everything financially, he can't even have his own room, and so the only room he gets is the library, basically, that Adam and Barbara created.
Right. Yeah.
And so right now immediately then the new family that enters into this home is not a traditional family. It's a divorced man. He's sort of a simp. He's with a woman who's very much more dominant. She doesn't care about his daughter. The daughter is interested in death, and she's very morbid, and she doesn't really have a close relationship with her parents. So very interesting, again, a representation of a sort of modern family a wealthy modern family moving into the home.
Yeah, and not only a wealthy modern family, but I think they represent an elite family in a number of ways. First of all, they're in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And
coming from New York.
They're coming from New York. She's involved in the arts. She's a patron of the arts and like sort of is a vanity artist. She's told later on by Dick Cavett, actually. It's from the Dick Cavett show, like in the 60s. He plays the old man he's like a gallery owner, and he tells her, like, you're a flake and your art sucks. Right. And we also learned that what's the guy's name? Robert Goulet. Robert Goulet is the guy who's Jeffrey Jones's boss, and he calls him a putz when he gets off the phone. He's in like a New York high rise. But it's interesting to me. This is one thing I noticed in the movie is that, first of all, the movie star, that doesn't star, but the character development in this movie is like incredible. The casting is amazing. Yeah. They could not have done a better job with the casting in this movie. It's incredible. They've got Cloris Leachman, who we'll get to later. She's the underworld or otherworld lady in charge of the ghosts. Yeah. She's got the smoke coming out of her throat. Yeah. You guys know who Cloris Leachman is. I'm gonna bop you one, young fella. She's like an old comedian. Like, she's really funny. But Jeffrey Jones plays essentially the same character as he does in The Devil's Advocate. Because Jeffrey Jones, you guys know this, Jeffrey Jones in real life is a convicted creeper. Okay.
I didn't know that.
He's in he's in Ferris Bueller, and he's in all these 80s movies. He's in I think UHF. But in real life he was a convicted creeper, and then after that he was in the movie Devil's Advocate. Jay's done a great analysis of Devil's Advocate, where Al Pacino plays John Milton, who's a lawyer, and he has to defend Jeffrey Jones, who I think in the movie is in the movie I think he's also in the law firm. Either that or he's a real estate magnate. That might be Craig T. Nelson. But regardless, one of them in the movie is a creeper, and that's why he has to defend him. And Jeffrey Jones in this movie is a real estate magnate, and he's working for a guy in New York. And then when he comes, we find out his reason for coming to this town, which is that he had a nervous breakdown. We don't know why he had a nervous breakdown, but even the movers kind of treat these people with contempt, and I don't think it's just because they're New Yorkers, because they're used to New Yorkers coming to Connecticut, and it's I don't know if it's a tax haven, but it's where a lot of, people from New York work in Connecticut or live in Connecticut. It's like a sort of a satellite.
Right.
And when he gets to the town, one of his first things when he settles down is like, I'm going to buy the town. Right. I'm going to own this whole town.
Yeah, we can commercialize and buy the whole place.
Right. Yes, and that plays into the fact that, like, when they go upstairs in the attic and he sees the model of the town, he thinks of it like, oh, I can own this town just like I can own this model of the town.
Right.
And part of his business plan is to do a seance so that the buyers, the investors, will see the dead and will invest. Remember, because that's why he has Robert Goulet over to the house, so they can prove that the ghost exists.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, and then the wife, this is like, that occurs all through this Aleister Crowley book, is that there are all of these all the time in high society. You have these women, like one of the people that he had an affair with was Cunard, from the Cunard shipping line, the shipping magnate. And she was a great patron of the arts. Peggy Guggenheim, great patron of the arts. And that's sort of what, is it Catherine O'Hara? I forget the actress's name, but that's what she's doing in the film. And of course, the other element is that she creates this hideous, gaudy art.
Yes.
But the funny thing is that it's representative of actual modern art.
Right. It looks like real modern art.
Right. It's total trash. But I think what Tim Burton is saying here, or at least what we read from it, is that no, modern art really is garbage like this. This isn't just a send up of modern art. Like, it really is like this. Right. And the husband pays no attention to it. It's kind of her thing. And then of course we get Winona Ryder, who, like, Winona Ryder is so good in this movie. I mean, this is like what made her, but she had already been in films before this. But, you know, like that line about the dad says, oh, honey, you can do your photography. We'll get you a dark room. And she says, my whole life is a dark room. You know, that's like, and then later on, like you said, she's dressed like in mourning throughout the whole film. She's total goth, you know. And later on, when she's talking to Beetlejuice and she almost conjures him, she says that she wants to die and she wants to throw herself off of the bridge, which is how the couple, the Maitlands, died.
Yep.
Yeah. So that sort of sets the scene. And then we have Otho, who we can get into if you want.
Yeah. So again, just encapsulating everything and moving through the movie, we talked about the opening where the family dies. They then are presented with the manual of the deceased. Right. We noticed that multiple references to spirituality, multiple references to demons, even a direct reference to the devil, but no reference to God. The closest thing is talking about heaven and hell, and that somehow they're in neither, or they're in some in-between place. Then the family moves in, the new family, which we talked about, sort of indicative of modern elite families, the dysfunction. And then the dead couple, Barbara and Adam, begin to try to haunt the house. And so that doesn't go too well. And this is after they sort of have to create their own doorway to then go into the realm of death, even though they are dead. So we see, again, the doorway symbolism is replete throughout the movie. And you never know what the other side of the doorway is, whether you're going to be in the dune sandstorm or you're going to go back to the old lady in charge of all the dead people and sit in your waiting room. Yeah. And so you go through that scene, and then they tell them basically, what is the full advice the old lady gives them? Don't call on Beetlejuice. He was fired. All right. But basically she gives them permission to try to scare the family out of the house. Yes. And when they walk, it's like the waiting room of all waiting rooms. Right. And we later learned from Otho that he makes a joke about what happens to people who commit SUICIDE in the afterlife. They become bureaucrats. And that's exactly what all of the people working in the waiting room have done. Right. I mean, they hold up their hands or wrists and all this stuff. We see a magician's assistant who reminds me of the Black Dahlia. She's been sawn in half. Yep. We see like a guy who's been run over. And he's got tire tracks in him. We see a guy who's died of a shark bite. One of the things when they finally meet Cloris Leachman, who again is like so awesome. She's the old lady and she's dressed like a real estate agent. Like she's got pearls on or whatever. And she just has no time for anybody. And the football team keeps coming in. And they're like, they keep calling her coach. Yeah. She's like, I'm not your coach, young fella. But in that scene, there's a small part where they're talking to her and she says, hold on 1 minute. And you hear they say flight 409 now arriving. And flight 409 was at the time, I think, the worst plane crash in American history. It was in the 60s.
And I think most of the people who died on it were like in the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. Later on, there was another Flight 409, which was more recent, which you probably shouldn't say too much about it, but there are things that are odd about it. It was the I think Ethiopian Airlines, which is interesting. But yeah, she gives him advice and says, you have to go do whatever. But the interesting thing is that, again, everybody in the afterlife, in the movie, in their afterlife, it carries with them the method or the means by which they died. Right, that's what they carry on in the afterlife, except for the main characters, Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis, who seem to be. They're just dressed in their clothes, but they're not like dripping wet. They're not, whatever.
Right.
And yeah, she gives them that advice. Then they go back. She tells them not to call Beetlejuice because how did they find out about Beetlejuice? Like a card dropped out of the book, I think. It was like an ad.
Yeah.
Dropped.
Yep.
And so another thing is like the movie's called Beetlejuice, but he's hardly in the movie.
Yeah.
He's like 37 minutes of screen time or something.
Yeah.
He filmed for like 2 weeks. This was like a huge star vehicle for Michael Keaton. Spurg moment. You guys out there know what Michael Keaton's real name is. It's actually Michael Douglas, but there was already a Michael Douglas.
I did not know that.
So he changed to Michael Keaton, I guess for Buster Keaton. But anyway, right after this, of course, he went on to do Batman with Tim Burton, and then he was already a working actor, but this really, really made him. But yeah, the first time we see him is he's doing a car commercial, essentially. And he stole that. I think most of his lines are improvised in this film. And he stole that from, there was a guy who was a used car salesman, or just a car salesman in the Southwest. I think he, even to this date, is like the most successful car salesman in American history. He's worth, $1 billion or something. And the way that he made it was, he did these garish car, come on down to, Beetlejuice cars or whatever. And they were huge because nobody was doing those at the time. And Michael Keaton basically stole that. And that's the first time that we see him. He's doing this sort of carny car salesman routine, hire me. And that's how they get introduced to him.
Yeah. Salesman of death in a way.
Right. Exactly. Yes. Yes. Good point. Then what happens?
So they go to the death realm, wherever, the bureaucratic hell world. And then they come back and they start to try to become scary and do it their own, because the young girl, they find out she can see them. She's not terrified, even when they try to scare her wearing sheets over themselves or allowing her to see them. She's not scared. And so then they decide, well, okay, well, we're gonna do it our own this time, and it falls flat again.
Yeah.
And this leads into the first dinner that they.
Yes. And a couple of other things. One is that they try to go up into the attic to open the attic. They can't get in, right, because it's locked. But then later she goes up and she looks through. They like sort of phantasm, like push the key through the keyhole. And then when they go into the other world, she's on the other side of the door. It's like a door into the dark, and a green, like vaporous light, which is the light that they walk into, sort of comes through the keyhole. So the symbolism there is, she's looking through this keyhole like Alice. Right. And the color green has popped up in like 3/4 of the last streams that I've done. It's always associated with death. It always is this sort of demonic vapor that appears in the scenes that we've done in all these works. And then, like you said, like they try to scare her, but she sees that they're floating, right? Because she sees them as people, but when she takes pictures with her Polaroid, they have no feet because they're just sheets. And that's when they realize, like, oh, she's she's an empath or whatever. She's, sensitive to death. She's young. She's probably been through some trauma. Her dad's a creeper. So for some reason, she's associated with death throughout the movie. We'll see at the end what happens to her at the end, which I think is especially significant. But, and then anyway, she talks to them, and the plot in the movie is really weird because it's like, what is the plot? I guess the plot is they want to be able to. They want the people out of their house.
Yeah,
right.
They're dead, and they want to enjoy their house
Right.
to themselves.
Yeah, and they've been told that they have a 125-year sentence essentially as undead, I guess, living in the house
Ghosts,
before they go
some
on.
sort of in between.
Yeah, and she essentially wants to die. And the family that moves in, like her family, they want to escape from whatever it is, trauma or breakdown that he's been through. She wants to sell her art. Then the plot becomes like, oh, we're going to buy the town. And then Beetlejuice's whole, I guess, plot becomes that he wants to be conjured up and live in the world and take human lives. Right.
Which he needs a virgin bride to do so, which is, again, a common, again, virginity, female virginity.
Yeah.
So then taking a pure virgin and then marrying her off to Beetlejuice is how Beetlejuice can take that virginity, that purity, and then like raise himself into reality, sort of resurrect himself.
Right.
So you see a sort of inversion of Mary, and the point where they didn't have feet. Not that I think this has a direct connection, but one of the things that first popped in my mind when I was watching that was how Christ washed the feet of his disciples.
Right.
And they don't have feet to be washed.
Oh, interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
How God showed humility, the whole icon of him washing the feet of his disciples, these people that are in this, between world, as ghosts, they don't have feet. And so, I think that's just an interesting, I don't know what exactly, there's a lot you could unpack there, but, I don't know. Again, I doubt that Tim Burton maybe made that direct reference, but I thought it was certainly interesting to think about.
Yeah, that's pretty clever, though. Yeah, that's pretty clever. One of the things that I noticed in the film was, we should talk about Otho, the character Otho, because first of all, he's played by this actor Robert Shaddix, who, when you watch he's by far the best character in the film. I mean, he's like, this guy was born to play this role in this movie. And he is essentially, we have the husband and wife who come in, and he's the sort of third character. He's like an outsider character.
Right.
And he's an interior designer. And he is sort of, he's he's all of these things, but he's so he also represents a literary archetype. He's like, I can't remember who it is in Oscar Wilde, but especially in like comedies of manners and in Victorian comedy, Edwardian comedy, there's always a character who lives with the family that is that type of character who is no threat. He's essentially a eunuch, but he's there to direct the attention away from the husband purposefully, and the husband's okay with it because the husband has whatever going on.
Right.
And he comes in and like you said, he's portly. He's like well-dressed, but like in an avant-garde, style. And he's got this haircut, and he's got like a bolo or something on. And he comes in.
It's like a Western bolo.
And like the first time we see him, they come into the house, but he comes in through the window. So we know right away that he's conscientious of
superstitious.
Anything superstitious, right? Yeah. So he sort of, but he also kind of falls through the window. So he's sort of a bumbling character.
Right.
And we learned that his name is Otho, and it's, Otho. It's spelled like Otho, which is, we just did the 12 Caesars by Suetonius, and Otho was the emperor who, it was Nero, and then Galba, and then Otho. And Otho, the emperor, lived for a short time. He committed suicide, but he also, his descriptions by this 2,000-year-old Roman writer are the same as the way this guy's described, the way that he looks in the film. I mean, he's sort of feminine. He's well put together. He's clean shaven. And also Robert Shaddix was known for playing, one of his major stage roles was as Nero.
Right.
And Shaddix also in his real life, he died of little AIDS, like in the 80s. And he was a protege of Tennessee Williams. And he's like this very in the film, he's obviously a theater actor when you watch this in the film. He's so, and one of the things I noticed that he does is right when they're taking the tour of the house, he takes out these spray paint cans and he says, "Oh, we need to redo this out," whatever. And he's going to spray paint the rooms, and she spray paints mauve on one of the walls. He does not vermilion. He later says vermilion in his spell, but I forget what the first color is. But then when he comes to one of the doors, he spray paints a sigil or a glyph on one of the doors, which I didn't notice. He spray paints a gamma glyph on one of the doors, and gamma is like a processing, like a moving on, like a this world and the other world. And if you're watching this, you may think like, oh no, you're reading too much into that. But he says, right after that, he says, I sense something in this house. There's some sort of presence in the house.
Right. And
then they say, like, they call attention to the fact that like he is sensitive to other things. Oh, the other thing I was going to mention about his name is the name is pronounced Otho, which I can't help but think of OTO. The reason that I think that is because, number one, they pronounce it like Otho, and I think of like, cults and sort of a occult ritual, which he later does in the film. He leads a seance where he speaks magic words and conjures the two couples back into the world of the living, right? Also, he says, when they talk about his life, he says, listen, I was not only a member of the Living Theater in New York, but I was also, he says something like, I was a frequenter of tarot readings and the esoteric in the East Village. So we know he's explicitly associated with the occult.
Right.
The Living Theater, this is like sort of a side note, but the Living Theater that he mentions is a pun because he's living and they're dead in the film. But the Living Theater it's the oldest experimental theater company in the United States. And they're responsible for, it's like an avant-garde theater company. They were sort of Beat Generation. They were founded by this guy, I can't remember his name, but the guy who founded it was founded on like Artaud's Theater of Cruelty and it like essentially like involving the world. Like the point is in avant-garde theater, it's like breaking the fourth wall. And there's no difference between the audience and the play. So it's all involved in this sort of absurd, like terror world. Mm-hmm. And the guy who founded that plays the preacher in Poltergeist 2. Have you guys seen Poltergeist 2? It's the guy, Carol Ann. And he's like a Pentecostalist, but he leads their church service down into the underworld under the house, and he's like sending them to hell. And I thought that sounds random, but this film, the idea for this film came about because of the success of Poltergeist 1. Mm-hmm. Because I think it was David Geffen produced both films, and David Geffen, of course, who produced both films, is allegedly, notoriously a CREEPER.
Okay.
Yes. So Otho is sort of he's a character like Winona Ryder in a way, because they kind of have a sort of a connection, and he's an interior designer. But everything about him is sort of this if Beetlejuice is like the trickster, sort of Beelzebub character, then Otho is like I don't know what he is, like the buffoonish. I don't know. I'm not sure what his archetype is, but he's certainly an occultist.
One of the things that I thought about too is how Otho is the authoritative figure. And so in this new representation of family, you see the sort of simpy financial producer of the father, and he's bossed around by his new wife, and she does everything that Otho says. And so what Otho says, the wife agrees with, which then dominates her husband to do. And in a way, that's, again, the recasting of society itself. Who are we led by? Who do the women listen to?
Right. That's a good point.
Whose values do they do force upon their simpy husbands and boyfriends?
Right.
And then you see the nihilism of the daughter. And so I feel like in a way it almost, whether that was intentional or not, again, it sort of capitalizes on something, a phenomenon that we're seeing in society generally speaking. Who is the authoritative figure? Right. And the only one that you would say maybe had any sort of traditional masculinity is Beetlejuice.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he's certainly the authoritative male figure. I mean, he dominates, right? In the film.
Which one are you talking about? Beetlejuice or?
Yeah, I mean, he's magnetic. He's
but Otho, in regards to the to the living world, he's the one that has the authority even over the family, even over the husband. Yes,
absolutely. And the husband is also continuously, he's put down by the other male figures.
Yeah, he's continually neutered.
Yes, he is. Especially when, he's sort of groveling to his boss on the phone, or when the art people comes over. And it's like he's sort of given the head of the table when they have their dinner scene, but he then is brought down low by the Deo Calypso sequence where he's like involved in the like sort of ritual dancing. Yeah. And he's made a fool of, right? What do you make of that? What do you make of the song in the film, the role of that song?
Yeah, I was trying to think about why did they choose that song? And the only thing I can think of is the continual reference of daylight come and me want to go home. And so where is home? What is home? And really then that's like the whole framework for the entire movie. Is we're at this house, the ghosts, it's their home. No, it's the family, it's their home. No, Beetlejuice, what's his home? What is the home of death? So it's like orientation is like a real constant theme of the entire framework of the movie. And then this song seems like it's kind of out of place. It's fun. It's kind of upbeat, nice to listen to. I mean, if you look at the lyrics, come Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. Daylight coming, they want to go home. Lift 6 foot, 7 foot, 8 foot bunch. Daylight coming, me want to go home. 6 foot, 7 foot, 8 foot bunch. Why this song? And it seems like the only thing I could think of is the whole idea of me want to go home. Beetlejuice wants to get home to the living. They want to get home to their own house. And then the family, they want their own home, I guess, of status and wealth and prestige. The little girl wants to go home to death. I mean, I don't know what that's kind of what my take from it was. What was yours?
Yeah, I think that the Tallyman is Beetlejuice, right? And the Tallyman is the guy he's sort of the Grim Reaper.
Is that what the Tallyman is?
And
I don't even know what a Tallyman is. I've never even heard that reference.
The Tallyman in the actual. Well, the Tallyman, the actual song, I mean, the song is essentially the lyric. It's like a working man's song. So it's like guys on the dock and they're working all night and they're, moving bananas in the boat or whatever. And they want daylight to come so they can go home. And Tallyman is like the boss, right? Or the guy who's going to, he's going to write everything down and then you can go home. But he's also the guy who like overlords them. He's responsible for them, right? He can give them their job or take it away. And so I sort of see that as both a Beetlejuice who like, is a Tallyman in the sense that he is, like you said, he's this bioexorcist, right? And he's a reversal of the normal sense of an exorcism, right? Which is to remove the demon from the human, but he wants to remove the human from the human world. He's like a Grim Reaper figure, but also like some sort of, archetypal, like trickster Tiresias.
Yeah, well, he's archetypal, definitely in the sense that he's anti. Again, if you use Christ as an archetype, he's the exact opposite, right? Cleanliness, order, speech, honor, mercy, right? He's not really merciful or compassionate. He's very self-centered. He's very egotistical. He uses profanity. He'll lie straight to your face, like. And then the chaos, the death, the skin color, the it's like he's the opposite of all those qualities of Christ or the logos that we would associate with divinity.
Yes, he's charming.
Yes,
because he's charming enough to use people or to get his way, right? But he's also, like you said, he's filthy. He represents chaos, degradation. He's dead in the dead world. He has to rise out of the grave and then rise out of the model world and then rise out of the dead to come to their world. He talks about how he was there when he's essentially like a man. I think Michael Keaton described it like in an interview. He said that Beetlejuice is a man of all time and a man of no time. Essentially, like he's like in Master and Margarita, right? He was there when this happened. He was there when the plague happened.
Yeah,
he was there.
The Wolin type figure. Yeah.
Yes, and he's associated with snake. He continuously has snakes. So he's a serpent. He's a liar.
Yeah.
He's got rats. He eats cockroaches. He's filthy. He's also perverse.
Yeah.
He's explicitly perverse at the conclusion of the film. But like, notice there's also there was a scene where the scene where he transforms into the snake was explicitly phallic, and he's going after Winona Ryder. He's also there's a scene where we just covered Dante's Inferno, and there's a scene where he says, "Oh, I need to relax" or something like that. And he sees a bordello, and the bordello is called like Dante's World.
Yeah.
And it's like flaming, and there are these, sirens on the outside. They're saying, "Come on, come on." And he goes into this house, and then the next time we see him, he's like sitting in a rocking chair. And that's when Winona Ryder sees him, and she says something, and he says some cool remark back to her. She's like, I forget what it is, but he's obviously trying to, seduce her or whatever. And what else about that? The song, back to the song is a Calypso song, and Calypso mythology, in the Odyssey, Calypso is the demigoddess who lures Odysseus to the island. Remember, she's like spinning the loom, like a golden loom.
Yep.
And she lures him to the island and says, like, "You're going to stay here with me forever." He stays with her 7 years. And then finally he's like pining to go back home. So she puts wind in his sail and sends him on. But in other words, it's like Odysseus has this, he has to, there's a middle ground. There's a purgatory, an other world or whatever. It's peripheral to his main vision. And it's a tangent. He has to stay there for a little while before they can move on. Just like
the in-between world. I mean,
the in-between world.
That the whole movie's about this in-between world.
Right.
And so I just want to say, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but guys, smash that like if you guys can. We got 70 some people in here, and we got to get the likes up. So smash that like, and if you would like to support, feel free to throw in a super chat using the Streamlabs link. So we move from then where they go to the realm of the dead, Beetlejuice. They eventually do call on Beetlejuice because they're just not, they're desperate. They're not scary enough. And then he comes, and now they basically made him used a contract with him. Even the daughter says his name's 3 times and then agrees to marry him. So maybe let's now get into the last quarter of the movie, which is now Beetlejuice has become a central role. His services have been called upon both by the dead couple and by the little girl. And now they're getting ready to see what's going to happen. And he takes it a little bit too far, right? He drops the father from the second story stairwell, and he lands on his back. And then the dead couple, they're like, "Oh my gosh, you could have killed him." And Beetlejuice doesn't care. I mean, why would that be a problem? The whole point is to scare them out. And if they die, so be it. Even the better. Right. Yeah. They conjure him to. His purpose is to scare the people out of the house. And he becomes a serpent. That's how he scares them. He does. And when Otho, by the way, I thought this was weird. When Otho falls down the stairs and like hits his head at the bottom of the stairs, that's Otho. The guy who played him, David Shaddix, died of. That's how he died. He didn't fall downstairs, but he fell and died of blunt force trauma. I thought that was weird. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying anything out there, but I just thought it was weird. So he becomes the serpent.
he uses all of his tricks. They unleash him, right? They conjure him. He silences. He says, we're coming after after Winona Ryder. So he explicitly wants to take her. And then they fast forward to, there's a wedding. There's going to be a wedding scene. And this was crazy right here. Notice that Winona Ryder, who is, a little GIRL in the movie, appears in Scarlet. She's the Scarlet Woman.
Yes.
Her wedding dress is red. She's in a red wedding dress. He says he has to marry her. He has this ghostly figure. They're getting married, by the way. In they're not their altar, but the backdrop is a skewed portal, it's like a hearth. So they're going to get married in front of this furnace, right?
Right.
And then he silences. They all try to say his name. He silences the wife, Gina Davis, by putting a metal thing over her mouth, right? So it's he silences her, and then he throws what's his name, Alec Baldwin, into the Saturn world. Or no, he throws Gina Davis in there.
Right.
She gets into the other world. She rides the snake through the doors of perception, you guys.
Yeah.
And then comes down out of the other world and then swallows the Michael Keaton Beetlejuice, takes him into the other world. She magically appears back there. Their world is cleansed of Beetlejuice. And then I guess the parents what happens to the parents at the end? Are they gone?
It doesn't. That's what I was thinking as an adult. It doesn't give you a conclusion of the parents. You see the girl, she's at school, so she's not dead. She actually is with living people. And then they do have the whole dancing scene again to the Banana Boat song again at the end.
Yeah, so she's adopted by the ghost.
Are her parents the adopted ghost, or the ghost adopted her or something? It doesn't give a conclusion. And in even the wedding scene with Beetlejuice, as Winona Ryder's the sort of Scarlet Woman in the red. Well, what's the exact opposite is also occurring. So Beetlejuice is believed that he's going to come to life through this ceremonial ritual marriage. Well, at the same time, Gina Davis and
Alec Baldwin.
Alec Baldwin, they're dying. They're in their groom and wedding dress.
That's right.
And they're dying. So they begin in their pristine state. They're elevated above the table, and they start slowly dying as where Beetlejuice and Winona Ryder, again, from his perception, they're going to be rising to life. So there's this sort of magical exchange. Again, another sympathetic connection of taking one and flipping it into the other.
Yeah, there's certainly the Gnostic elements in this are certainly, Otho has to use their old wedding gown and black tie as the temporal, as the physical concrete things that will allow him to make connection with the dead Winona Ryder and Gina Davis, for the conjuring at the table. And then so when they appear, they are taken out of their, spirit bodies or whatever it is and put back into their temporal bodies in the wedding clothes, and then they appear old and decrepit, like you said. And then so it's like they're a death. It's like a death wedding.
It's like they were going to die inside the realm of death, right? So they're getting ready to take the place that Beetlejuice has been resurrected from, and then by him taking the living bride, he's going to be elevated back into the state of the living.
Right. And the irony is that they, I guess, banish this Beelzebub spirit, with his own serpent into the waiting room of death or whatever. And then, of course, there's the scene that's really funny when you're 8 years old, which is there's a shrunken head guy next to him, and then he steals the guy's thing, and the guy conjures it and shrinks his head, and you think that's funny. But it's now he's just become a part of everyday death in their world.
Yeah.
But the irony is that they banish him, but Winona Ryder is still alive. Her parents are gone. Now her parents are these spirits, and they raise her from living. She transcends in a way, because the last scene is her rising. She's hovering in the air like a witch, right? She's floating, which is like, I mean, if you guys have seen that movie, The Witch, that's the final scene of The Witch. That's in the Goya paintings. You know, it's this levitation, this hovering of the witch, and she's floating in the air. They're playing the song again. She's, you know, she's dancing and it's cool or whatever, but she's this hovering witch. And I thought that was really strange. That's the climax of the film. Yeah. By the way, there's boomers outside mowing the grass. If you guys can hear that.
Oh no, I don't hear it. I think we're good on the sound, but yeah. And so then that kind of then concludes. Somebody wrote in the chat that the father and mother are in the library. The mother makes a sculpture of Beetlejuice's snake head.
She does. Yes, good point. Yes, she does. She comes back in. So the parents are alive.
Yeah.
That's
so
right.
There's like this weird harmony between both the parents and the girl.
Right. And of course, you know, the art market, right, is now that's going to be the next big trend, right, is this serpentine, you know, devil head phallic figure of Beetlejuice, right? That's, you know, she's found her inspiration from the occult.
Yeah, and in a way, isn't that's perfect. The phallic imagery of the serpent is the sort of corresponding element to the absence of traditional masculinity. Right. And so you see the absence of tradition. I mean, I guess Adam is the closest thing to it, even though at times he's kind of a weak-willed guy. And yet at the end, like you said, the sort of serpentine phallic symbolism of Beetlejuice will become a sort of venerative art symbol. And in a way, it's his phallus in a way that is artistically remembered and perpetuated, because Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin can't have kids, and right. I doubt that, you know, her parents are going to be intimate. Right. So yeah, there's very interesting symbolism there with the sort of phallic symbolism in Beetlejuice.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, if only they'd done the sequel, Beetlejuice in Hawaii. I'm not kidding. That was the name of the proposed sequel.
Wow. I'm glad they didn't, because that just...
and they signed. They actually all signed on to do it, like they were ready to do it. And the reason they didn't do it is because Tim Burton was like, "Nah, I think I'm going to make Batman," and Michael Keaton was like, "Yeah, let's do that."
Yeah,
but can you imagine? Yeah.
No.
Anyway.
Hawaii doesn't have the right elements for that story. Right. But yeah, I guess in concluding, then, what I was taken away from, and shout out to Alan S., he says, never realized so many levels to this film, loved it as a kid. And I loved it as a kid too. And as I watched it as an adult, and I had been totally disconnected from that thing. I mean, it'd probably been since I was 10 years old or something since I'd watched that film, of how occultic it really is, how normalizing it is of magic and ritualistic ceremonies. The normalization of possession as a good thing. This is one of the things that Beetlejuice can grant them, that if, you know, I forget, it was like one of his specials, you know, like buy one, get one free or something, but it was like you buy something and then you'll get like a free possession, you know, he'll give you a demon to possess somebody with.
Yeah.
That, as a kid, it was just totally ignorant to all this stuff. You know, the voodoo guy with the small head that was, you know, hit by a voodoo witch doctor. That was just funny. Look how big his body is. Look how small his head is. But then as an adult, you see that there's no role for Christianity, yet at the same time, in a way, it's within the Christian paradigm.
Yes.
So it's very interesting. No reference to Christ, no symbolism of a cross anywhere, I don't believe. At least when I watched it, I didn't see that. And no mention of the word God, because that was something I noticed right at the beginning. Once they died, I was like, oh, you know, that nobody says God, and I was waiting for it, but they did say the devil at some point. So yeah, I was blown away by the occultic symbolism of this movie, how deeply occultic it is, how interesting the symbolism when you deconstruct it, like what's really going on there, and yet how enamored I was by it as a child, totally oblivious to all those things.
Yeah. I think that in a way, it serves the same function as, you know, a fairy tale or a folk tale. I mean, you've done streams specifically on the symbolism in folk tales. Jamie's done those. And I think that it sort of functions as like a sort of a neo folk tale or a folk tale for the the coming millennium. Oh, that
Yeah.
reminds me. Yeah. One line I thought was really funny when I was 8. I remember saying this to one of my friends when I was 8 years old, and like we were just laughing about it. Like he says something like, "I'm the man of the millennium," or something like that. And I think that I don't know why I thought that was so funny back then, but it functions as sort of a postmodernist, fairy tale. And like you could also say that it's absurd. It's absurdist. There's a lot of theatrical. It's the movie's very theatrical. I think when you look at it in light of the rest of Tim Burton's oeuvre, you guys, it's like the start of his long line of explicitly monarch. His movies became at one point just puppet movies, animation, claymation movies, right? The Jack Skellington or whatever character appears in this film in the background. Coraline, like all these monarch movies. Winona Ryder is sort of seems to be like an Alice or a monarch character. And I think, like you said, that you have to look at the film in the lens of like a Christian paradigm. It's not like a pagan folktale. It's explicitly occult. And I think that I read an article, and one of the comments was that the so-called satanic panic, which was real, made way for films like this. And one of the insidious things is that the article I read specifically talks about McMartin, and no mention of the tunnels, by the way, but McMartin and all that, and how when that was debunked, part of the function of this film and movies like The Addams Family is that it makes it into a joke.
Right.
And it's insidious because it's like, oh, this is funny and this is for kids. By the way, notice that the film is the film PG? I think it's one of the last PG rated films that has.
Let me look real quick.
That has the F word. Like Beetlejuice cusses.
Yeah, he does. That's what I was blown away by, some of the stuff that he says, because I watched it so often as a kid that I was like,
Because one of the things that qualifies a film from PG is not all cuss words, but especially that word. And he says it at one point. And I wonder how they got away. I wonder how I guess because David Geffen produced it and was like, no, we got to put this in here. And so, yeah, I just think that, in light of the events of the 80s leading up to it, and even now, how much this film has, become part of popular culture. It's called a cult film. It's a cult movie because it's, but it's not. It's a mainstream movie. The movie made a huge amount of money. It has a long legacy. It affected, Tim Burton's entire body of work. There's so many movies in the late 80s and 90s that obviously take a cue from this film, and it became mainstream. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of the more insidious parts of it. That you're a kid and you laugh at this movie, but like you said, you're an adult, you go back and watch it, and it's so dark. It's such a dark movie.
Yeah. And as we mentioned, it was such a legitimate success. I think $15 million was donated to the production of this movie. Right. And it grossed like over $74 million. And then afterwards there was Beetlejuice, animated television shows on ABC. There was Beetlejuice video games, Beetlejuice color books. So again, isn't it so ironic that Beetlejuice was interested in the child, and in a way the entire occultism is being normalized, whether it be the Addams Family or Beetlejuice? It's really, again, it's after the children.
Yeah.
And again, so then Christ tells us that the children in their purity, their innocence, allows them to be closest to him. And I've said this with the normalization of pedophilia, and that, Satan is most certainly after the children. And so the pedophilia, why these billionaire, people that could have anything in the world, what is it about children that they love so much? Is they love the inversion of the purity. They love the fact that they're doing something that no matter how much money you have in the world, you can't purchase this sort of like sexualization of purity, of innocence, of children, and getting off on that and dominating it. Weird stuff. But it's like that's the essence of evil itself. And so then these movies, whether it be the Addams Family, whether it be Beetlejuice, it's like they're presented in these sort of comical, lighthearted ways for children, but really that's what was so amazing is how much are we actually affected by this stuff? I mean, Hollywood and these movies and the symbolism that we're trying to speak on today, I mean, whether we're conscientious of it or not, it affected us all. And it continues to until we bring it up to the conscious mind and look at it and analyze it. Yeah. And so it's like, wow, you look at 2022 now and the way the young kids are, the transgenderism, the tattoos, getting tattoos at 13 years old and all the piercings and, it's like, wow, being into occultism. Yeah. It's really quite eye-opening.
Yes. These are sick people. And how are you going to have a movie where the two people die and they never consider praying?
Yeah.
They never think to ask God,
yeah,
where
God never mentioned once.
They never, and not only that, but even the idea the world of the movie is they are in a spirit world, right? But even when Alec Baldwin draws the door, right? He draws the door of perception or the door to the other side or whatever on the brick wall. And Gina Davis's response is like, she makes fun of him. She's like, oh, this is so stupid. Why would you even think this works? It's like, lady, you're dead. You're in the spirit world and you still mock, you still mock the idea of
supernatural,
anything metaphysical or any meaning. Just everything in their life is just is meaningless, So yeah, I think that these are sick people. I mean, they had, mirrors play a big role in this movie.
Right.
And how, when they're dead, the way that they find out that they're dead is they come back to the house, they look in the mirror and they don't see the reflection. She's holding the horse and she sees the horse floating. And then of course the mirror, the camera sort of, functions as a mirror because she takes the picture, it goes through the lens, and then she sees that about the feet. But they aren't able to reflect on themselves in a deep way. They aren't able to reflect on their situation or on the meaning of existence within their own the paradigm of the film. So
yeah. Well, I know that you had some notes. Is there anything you wanted to get to that we didn't?
I think there's a lot that's peripheral about this film.
We'll go into it.
I think we've covered a lot of it. I think that some of the other things are that some of the casting choices. One interesting thing about this film is that the original choice for Beetlejuice for Michael Keaton was supposed to be Sammy Davis Jr.
What?
Yes, and the reason that Tim Burton said he wanted Sammy Davis Jr. is because he wanted sort of an entertainer, and Sammy Davis Jr. was like legitimately the entertainer character
and talented.
Yes, he wanted a talented
Luciferian.
Exactly. So he wanted this entertaining character, this sort of circus character, somebody who had a different look than Michael Keaton certainly had. But we can't help watching that. We here, you guys in the audience, we can't help but think immediately when you think Sammy Davis Jr., you should immediately think Anton LaVey, Sammy Davis Jr., explicitly Luciferian. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Right. Of course, Sammy Davis Jr. said he wasn't interested. And some of the other things were, let me see.
Guys, smash that like if you haven't. And then if you want to throw in a super chat, we're going to get to them here in a few. Use the Streamlabs link. I would greatly appreciate that.
Yeah, you guys. Come on now. Send some super chats into DPH here, man. You got a long trip to Montana. Gas prices are up. Come on.
Montana tomorrow.
Send him your
super
chats.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
And also, shameless plug, please go to my channel. Go to Bazed Lit Analyzer and sub. Help me get those subs up, you guys.
The link is in the video description.
Yeah, the first time I was here, of course, is where my channel got boosted, of course, thanks to this gentleman. So please help me get up. I'm at like, I don't know what, almost 600 or something. Help me get up to 700.
600. You were under 200 last time you were on.
Yeah.
So you've
thank
tripled
you,
in size.
I appreciate you. I guess one of the only major other things is let's see. Beetlejuice is just the. I mean, I'm not really familiar with the I guess astrological, stuff going on with Beetlejuice itself. I know that I read one thing about Alice Bailey, of course.
Oh.
Alice Bailey talking to the Tibetan masters or the Ascended Masters. And of course, I've been going through the Ascended Masters and all those things with Aleister Crowley. I'm going to do a part 2 on him coming up with Blavatsky and all that stuff. But one thing I read, just this is an excerpt, as one of the 9 stars mentioned specifically by the Tibetan master in his dictations to Alice Bailey, Beetlejuice is a celestial factor of abiding interest and curiosity to the esoteric community. It's considered from the angles of observational astronomy, esotericism, and mythology. And Bailey demonstrates that Beetlejuice finds place within the solar plexus of the one about whom naught may be said. And affects the capitalized new group of world servers and the senior members of hierarchy. It is the source for the third cosmic path, or the path of training for planetary logoi. In other words, well, that sounds pretty bad, you guys. So, in other words, Beetlejuice is I think the second brightest star in Orion. It's one of the brightest stars in the visible sky. It's huge. It's a gigantic, red dwarf. It's supposed to explode or whatever. And I think that, I tried to do more than just that as a surface level to connect with the name Beetlejuice and with the character in this. But I think that the point is that the star and astrology and the character in this represents sort of an expanding character of death who's trying to swallow up life in its compass. And I think that certainly the connection with the Ascended Masters and all that stuff, and Alice Bailey and Beetlejuice is like this guiding,
Yeah, and I also couldn't help but notice too. I mean,
evil star or whatever.
Your internet's slowing down for a second.
It seems to be.
There it goes.
I don't know.
You're cutting out. I can't.
Yeah, it went unstable.
Okay, there you go. Now you're back. Yeah, and also, I mean, as a dwarf star, as the red star, it's another sort of instance of the false light, right? The Luciferian light, the false light of enlightenment or release or attainment of some sort. I mean, Beetlejuice perfectly embodies that, even with the astrological references in context as well.
Right. Yeah, but that's about all I got. I think
this has been a really good interview and overview of the deconstructing Beetlejuice and the symbolism. And I imagine a lot of people probably go watch the movie. They haven't seen it in probably forever. And I'd still like to do Master Margarita with you sometime. I also would like to do, maybe as we get closer to Christmas time, we can do The Nightmare Before Christmas, or maybe October, do it before Halloween. Are you still there? You're cutting out again. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm good. I can hear you fine.
Okay, your video just stopped working. I didn't know.
So
I was thinking maybe, Halloween or Christmas time, we can do The Nightmare Before Christmas. And really dive into that one, and even deconstruct, how they represent the different holidays and the different figures, and this whole sort of blending together, and use it and look at it from a Christian and occult perspective. And I would, like I said, like to do the Master and Margarita again. I think that's a really interesting book with a lot of interesting archetypes in deconstruction there regarding Woland and Satan's ball, the devil's ball, and what all that stuff means, and true love, or all that. So
I'd love to, man. Yeah, let's do it.
So
sounds good.
Before we hop into the super chats, anything else you want to say real quick?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you. Always have a good time here. Thanks to everybody who's watching. Shouts out to all my homies out there. Um, yeah, I hope everybody's having a good summer, and I hope I hope your trip goes well.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm excited to meet people. I'll
Yeah.
be able to meet Rachel and Andrew. I know they'll be out in Montana. So it's going to be a lot of fun. My flight tomorrow is going to be a long day for me. So my flight leaves Indianapolis at 6 a.m. So that means I need to be at the airport at least an hour ahead of time.
Yeah.
And I live a solid 40 minutes away from the airport.
Yeah.
So that means I got to get up at like 3 in the morning.
Just don't go to sleep. Just drink some of these GMO drinks. You'll be up all night, you guys.
Yeah, my goal is to try to get some sleep and then get out there. Then I go to Dallas, connect, and there's actually somebody who'll be going to Montana who's also going to be on that same flight from Dallas to Bozeman. Get my rental car, drive there, and hopefully have a wonderful 4 days. And I'll be back early Monday morning. My flight leaves Bozeman at like 11 p.m., so that means I don't get here because I got to go to Atlanta first till like 8 a.m. Monday. So Monday I definitely won't be streaming. I'll be sleeping, and then Tuesday I should be back in action with a.
Well, shouts out to you and to of course Base Homeschool Mom and BPF, and of course to Father Deacon Ananias, Norwegian Noose. You're gonna have a good time out there.
Oh yeah, we had a great time. Well, we had a fun time just out there in California.
Yeah,
we had a Memorial Day to remember for sure.
Yeah.
So we went to a really beautiful restaurant right there on the beach at Laguna Beach there in Laguna Hills.
Yeah.
And had had a few drinks and walked the beach, enjoyed the sun, got in the ocean, and it was a great time. So Father Deacon, Michael, and myself, we had a lot of fun in California. Really looking forward to reconnecting with him. Father Deacon's always a good time. Anybody who knows him in person knows that he is a fun time for sure.
Right.
So anyways, getting into the first super chat for today comes from our buddy Jerry from Exposing Powerful Lies. Throws in $10 and says, so much love to Henley, DPH, Jethro, Crispy, Nate, Ellie, Kristen, Block Party, OK, Rachel, Splatigan, and to the rest of the homies who make this corner of the internet feel like family. Thank you for having on BLA. That must be what the kids call you now.
Yeah.
And to many more great streams. Cheers. Well, thank you so much, Jerry. I appreciate that. And I always enjoy, again, we've only done this our second stream together, but we're definitely going to have to do more. I love diving in and doing deconstruction, symbolism, analysis type stuff. I love doing that.
Sweet.
So shout out to you, Jerry. Really appreciate it. Genghis Khan was in the audience today, and he threw in $5 with no comment. So thank you very much, Genghis Khan. I hope your bloodline is still doing well in China. Next super chat comes from the real Cooter Brown. Throws in $14.
Yo! Shouts out to Real Cooter, OG out there.
Oh, do you know this person in real life?
Yeah, no, he's Real Cooter Brown's OG with the Chad nerds. Yeah,
Oh,
so
okay.
shouts out to you, homie.
Shout out to the real Cooter Brown. Throws in $14 and says, great stream today. Are either of y'all familiar with Wim Hof at all? I found his Mount Everest expeditions to be fascinating, but I watched a short documentary on his breathwork programs, and there seems to be something very dark going on there. Any thoughts?
I got no thoughts. I know JD knows about Wim Hof. I don't know if you do. And Everest, I don't know. We'll be covering. Listen, folks, we're gonna be covering. Forget about Everest. We're gonna be covering Chogo-Ri and Kanchenjunga with this pervert Al Crowley out there in the next stream. That's all I got to say about Everest. So
I do know a little bit about Wim Hof and his breathing method, and I think there's truth to aspects of it. For example, I think exhaling more than you inhale, that's one of the ways in which he tries to oxygenate the body so you can deal with temperature and all that stuff. I do believe from my understanding, the scientific evidence shows that if, releasing carbon is one of the problem. People, when they breathe, they don't actually exhale to the extent that they should. That's a big part of his sort of breathing technique, is like over exhaling to and then to bring air in. So I think that there's certainly something to it. at the same time, he's incredibly new age. And so when you talk about watching a documentary on his breath work and all that stuff, it's going to be totally wrapped up into a worldview where he's gone to Tibet and he's learned the secret, mysteries of the Tibetan masters, and
Right.
and that he's realigning with his sort of pagan ancestors. And so it's always both and. The fact that he can withstand, getting in the cold temperature. Yeah, I believe ice baths, getting into cold water, all this stuff is good for your immune system, shocks your system, helps produce testosterone. For men, again, like, your testicles, you get in cold water and you will stimulate testosterone just because your body feels like it's in an extreme situation that it needs to now respond to. So there's a lot of health benefits with some of Wim Hof stuff. But, I mean, as Christian, you just have to look at it, look what's reasonable, and then look at his worldview and see how, it's totally in a sort of understanding that he is God, that he's attaining his sort of innate virtue and spiritual power to be able to withstand exterior conditions and all this stuff. So, I think it's both and. And so is there dark things going on with his sort of breath work programs? Yeah, I'm sure. Maybe mantras, all that. I believe he believes in Kundalini and like the activation of your chakra systems. And so he's into all that. But some of his breath work at the same time, clearly it works. I mean, people go and take his classes and I see them, they're in shorts, in snow, they seem to be doing all right. So I definitely get your point there, the real Cooter Brown. I think it's both and so your spidey senses tingling about some dark energy going on, probably. And at the same time, your initial interest in his breath work and his Mount Everest expeditions probably is based in some type of reality and truth as well. Next super chat comes from Mikey Palmas. Throws in $10 and says, "What book that you once loved betrayed you and fell precipitously in your estimation later in life?" Ooh, I'll let you take that one first. Which book did you once love that has now fallen short for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I get the question right away. I don't know. That's a tough one.
I would say probably for me, when I start kind of running through books or texts, and he didn't relegate it to novels or whatnot, I would probably say the Hermetic corpus, Hermeticism, and or the Kabbalion. These books that I read in my New Age, times, I thought it was so profound. I thought this whole all is mind worldview of Hermeticism, and that it was this ancient Greek, Egyptian philosophy, theology. I thought it was incredible. I had, and I still have, almost all those books, but now they carry very little weight for me. So in my own journey, some of my magical texts, some of my Hermetic texts, the Emerald Book of it, Thoth, not that powerful for me anymore. So I would say probably a lot of my occultism and things like the Psychedelic Experience with Timothy Leary. Oh wow, what a great book! And now it's based on the Tibetan Manual Book of the Dead. I don't know. So I would say probably a lot of the New Age, magical, Hermetic stuff for me.
Yeah, I think that my take on it is essentially that I don't really have any books that I've fallen precipitously away from. I think what happens is that there are books that are established. For instance, I mainly read history. So if there's a book of that's considered a book of establishment history per se, the more time goes by and the older I get, I find that a lot of them are, either obvious propaganda or function as, a limited hangout. And one example that came to mind right away was Mark Bowden's Killing Pablo, which, like when it came out, I mean, I read it and I'm like, this is the coolest book ever. It's the history of, I like reading stuff like that. I like reading about, mafia and all, and all that, intelligence, geopolitics, all warfare, all that kind of stuff. And that's one of those books that I think that the book is co-opted by the establishment. I think that a lot of it is just propaganda. It's obviously not true.
Right.
And, the older you get, the older and the more, once you get red pilled and based out there, you start to realize, how much of the stuff you read is lies or not true or disinfo or whatever. But the fact is that you won't know that unless you have discernment and unless you've read the books in the first place.
Right.
And so I think that it's kind of a double-edged sword. That's how I would answer that.
No, I totally agree with you. And I think that that's one of the things I try to hammer home for people is you got to put in the work. And so I'm sure some of the people watch your streams and are jealous of some of the books that you've read to have the background for the analysis that you provide. But you got to put in the work, whether it's you want to have a literary comprehension and a sort of astute background of themes and motifs throughout important novels, whether it be theology, whether it be your spiritual life, whether it be your physical health, all these things, you got to put the work in. And so just read the books. And it's funny how once you read the book, it always leads into something else. It's like, oh, wow, I'm so glad I read that book last week because now this thing that popped up in my life this week, I can better understand its context because of something I read last week. And I feel like that's like a journey. It's like it's a different part of your journey. We have like these spiritual journeys, life journeys where, your experiences, the people you meet. But at the same time, it's like, for me, at least I'm speaking from my own personal experience, so maybe that's not true for everybody. But like the more I read, it's like it's a stationary activity. But I try to explain to somebody, it's like my mind runs miles, so I can like for a week not really go anywhere. And yet at the same time, I feel like I'm on the like life edge or the living edge of my life because I'm reading so much. I'm putting in 5 hours of reading a day and my mind, it's like in such a different place. It's like every time you read, you're like taking steps and your mind is moving.
Yes. Yeah. I think that, books, they, like you were saying I think that books, what I see continuously is that this intertextual idea of that, I'll read a book and there will be something in it or many things in it that will draw me in all these different directions. It's almost like a spider web in a way, like it draws you here. And then that reminds you of another book that you read where the same thing was said. And then that draws you in this direction. And they all sort of had this like weird interconnection. There's this weird interconnection of life amongst books in the written word. And that mirrors life, that life is much the same way. And there's a reason why books are powerful. Because they're written with words, and words are that's how we live. We think in words. We think in language. We do things with language. When people meet each other, they talk to each other. Everything is about communication or conversation, or, even if it's nonverbal, you're still thinking verbally. So I think that it's important to like you said, you got to put in the work. And that's tough, especially in the day that, that we live in. I mean, of course, and look, people like, if anybody's here, has watched my stream, like, it's like, a lot of the books that I cover, like, I don't expect people to have read those books. Sure. You know what I mean? And of course, I'm happy if somebody's like watching my stream about a book and they're, let's say the guy's like a bricklayer or something. I mean, I'm not out putting down bricks. I'm not building something substantial like that. I'm not doing something, concrete and physical like that actually has a function like
tangible, tangible product in the world.
And so, I think that's, but both can coexist.
Yes. And that, so at the same time, for anybody that's manual labor or blue collar labor, I mean, that's the service that I'm trying to provide. And I'm sure you feel the same way with what we do. Is I'm trying to read as many books and go on my own journey and then take that value and then present it to people in a very dense presentation that's been thought out, so that in a way, you know, unless you're really intrigued, you don't have to go down that. I've sort of done, again, as Jay says, we sort of do the homework for people so they don't have to. But just going on that journey, I think it can also be said that, yeah, nobody's judging anybody in our community, whether you've read XYZ book or this book or that book. But it is also true that even if you do manual labor, or, you know, because the absence of manual labor in my life could also be a critique of my wholeness as a person. But when you start reading books regularly and consistently, even if you are a bricklayer or whatever, your journey will accelerate. Things will make more sense. Again, it's like your mind can travel further than your body can. And so it's like you can put miles and weirdly sort of like experience into your personhood without actually going a lot of places. And there's also a detriment to that, because then you get the armchair theologian, you know, Joseph Campbell. This is what made Joseph Campbell. He was an obsessive reader, we would call armchair scholars and stuff throughout the 19th century. So all the British, you know, they'd be experts on Hinduism. They've never been to India. They just read books. So there's always pros and cons to everything, but I do recommend everybody reading books, because it's going to increase your literacy. It's going to increase your ability to critically think. It's going to increase your ability to hold thoughts consecutively, because anybody who's tried to read now, they're going to notice that they can't focus because of all the social media, because of the phone and everything. So, and as you said, we think in words. And so you can't think something you can't say to a degree. Now you can come up with like mental images, but you can't think something you can't articulate. And the more words and the more literary devices you have to describe the world, the more empowering that is. So anywho, so thank you so much, Mikey Palamas, for your super chat. Next one comes from Frankie D. Says, don't really have anything meaningful to say, but see you in Montana. Me and some friends begin our journey there tonight. Just subscribe to Bazed Lit as well. God bless you, gentlemen. Hey. Well, thank you so much, Frankie D. Let's see what you got over on. All right, so now you're at 600 over on YouTube. So we got we got you a quick 13 subs.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So now you're over the 600 mark, or at the 600 mark now. So anybody wants to subscribe to Bazed Lit Analyzer, his link is in the video description. And make sure you also check out the
my Instagram and all the links.
There you go.
Yeah.
And our previous stream.
Yes, and our previous stream, and DPH's website.
Yeah.
Yeah, crowd membership.
And then Rock E. Shepard throws in $10 and says, stop joking around. Well, thank you, Rocky Shepard, for your thoughts and for your $10. I appreciate it.
All right.
God bless you, brother.
Yeah, appreciate it. I'm not going to do that, but thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Frankie D. And then for the last super chat, Frankie D. throws in $3 and says, I've been watching a lot of Netflix. Well, God bless you. And Amazon Prime series. And they have a lot of pretty obvious anti-Christian masculinity themes, of course. Popular women shows always portray men as positive to the degree that they serve the female order. They can't ever be leaders. Well, just watch I think Hallmark movies. It's like they always have good-looking, wealthy, successful men that are very romantic. But yeah, it's most of the, almost anything you're going to watch is going to be anti-Christian, anti-masculinity. I think the masculine thing is to just like be the total opposite of all this stuff and just build up your own life, your own skill sets. I mean, anything you want to say about the anti-Christian masculinity themes and basically all films or all media today?
I mean, I don't know. The masculine thing is would be to, realize that Hollywood is total trash. It's just lies. Now that doesn't mean don't watch movies, but it means watch movies and just go on about your life. You know what I mean? And you can think deeply about movies. You can watch movies, but but Hollywood is not something to be. There's nothing to rise up to in Hollywood. You know, I mean, and we all know that. Everybody knows watching this now knows that, you know, it's like Hollywood figures as PR or agents of, you know, information or intelligence or whatever. And it's like, you know, it's just such an easy thing. And listen, there's nothing wrong with like loving entertainment or like talking, you know, with people and being like, oh, did you hear about this new movie? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. We all love that stuff. But as a serious thing, you know, you can't look up to anybody in Hollywood or entertainment as some kind of example of like who you want to be. It's just the wrong place. You're just looking in the absolute wrong place. Yeah. Look at them for what they are. And that is, you know, entertainment clowns. You know, as Richard Burton, I mean, I was an actor. Okay. So I know this better than most people, is that, you know, Richard Burton said like, he just felt so fortunate and so absurd because his whole family was, you know, slate miners in Wales, and he played dress up for a living, you know, and that's essentially what it is. So that's all I got for that.
Yep. No, I agree with that, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yes.
For some reason, Kristen says, I wonder if DPH took the jab to get on the plane.
Oh, hell, come on now. No, Kristen's just joking around. She knows. She's just pulling your leg. She's trying to get you. Kristen knows better than that.
She should. My God.
Nobody here. Kristen knows, and she ain't getting it, and I ain't getting it. And you're not getting it.
Hell
Nobody
no.
here's getting no stabby. Hell no.
I've been flying for a minute. It was the mask that you had to do. I mean, you never had to have the jab, at least in this country.
Yeah. Hell no.
No, hell no. Now you don't even have to have a mask, so I'm down with that. But I hate flying in general. Airports, the TSA, they always want to fondle you. I don't know why they always think I have something in my pants. Anywho, no, shout out to Kristen, fellow Hoosier. God bless you. Oh, Frankie D throws in one more. Says, I don't watch these things voluntarily. Whenever I sit with my girlfriend, or whenever I visit my girlfriend, they like watching these shows. Rarely do we watch more wholesome stuff, and there's really nothing available. I don't really even want to watch stuff anymore myself. Well, that's basically where I really don't watch anything unless it's like we're going to analyze something. Yeah. I'll watch that, but I don't really do. My entertainment now is maybe like some YouTube videos, music. That's about it. Everything else, I'm either reading, working, going to the gym, or eating. That's about it. So, brother, God bless you, man. I really appreciate our streams and all the work you're doing. Everybody, make sure you go subscribe to Bazed Lit Analyzer. God bless you all here. Please smash that like. And I am going to be going to Montana in the morning, so I will not be back until Monday of next week, and I won't stream until Tuesday of next week, which will be our first member-sponsored stream on Orthodox martyrdom, marriage versus monasticism. So that should be a fun one. But brothers, anything else you want to say here before hopping off? Really appreciate you coming on.
I just want to say thank you. Just thank you so much. Appreciate it again. Always have a good time with you. And I love the material and the content that we did. And, you know, I hope you have a good trip, have a great summer. And I appreciate you. Really appreciate you.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Thank you so much for having me.
Kristen said she donated on PayPal. Let me see real quick. Did you have a comment, Kristen? Oh, she did. Kristen threw in $5, so shout out to Slowboy Whiteboard. She says, thanks for having Henley on. This stream is fun. Well, thank you so much, Kristen. Again, hope your husband's enjoying that barber shop, and keeping that cut clean. But all right, well, thank you very much, Kristen, for your support. I really do appreciate it. And a special shout out to Frankie D, Rock E. Shepherd, The Real Cooter Brown, Mikey Palmas, Genghis Khan, and Jerry from Exposing Powerful Lies. I appreciate all you guys. And make sure to follow me over on Instagram if you want to stay up to date on all the activities over at Montana. But until next Tuesday,